Well, I was 18 years old. I signed a request for voluntary induction, and so I was drafted at my own request. I had 2 years of college at the time, and so I tested very high. And initially, I was assigned to the Air Force, but by a fluke, I was put on another shipment and sent to a quartermaster corps in then Camp Lee, Virginia. And upon reflection, I'm glad I didn't go to the Air Force, because I had never flown a plane, and they had me assigned to the Air Force to take flight training. And I was pulled off that, and happily I was pulled off that, because I could just think of myself as an 18-year-old either trying to learn to fly or flying and being killed. And so I survived. But I had a fairly privileged existence in the military. And it's an interesting thing. Even though the military was still segregated in 1945, I was assigned to what was called a headquarters company, because I had a skill that the Army wanted. And I happened to have been a champion shorthand writer, and they needed court reporters. And so I bypassed basic training. I was assigned to a court-martial section as a court reporter, and I was promoted from private to corporal 1 month, to sergeant the second month, to staff sergeant the third month. And so I not only was a shorthand reporter for courts-martial, but I was head of the section. So I headed the court-martial section for over a year until I was discharged in November of 1945. And I enjoyed my military experience, because I had no negative experiences. And but again, it was a segregated army, and I had the experience of observing German prisoners of war and Italian prisoners of war at Camp Lee, Virginia, being treated better than the black soldiers were treated. And but that again was a matter of passing moment, not anything to be greatly concerned about. And from a historical standpoint, you could look back on it and see why German prisoners of war and Italian prisoners of war were able to go into the white PXs and the black soldiers were not. But nothing was cut and dry. For example, among my extracurricular activities when I was in the Army I was the manager of a theater, a motion picture theater, that was integrated, so that black soldiers and white soldiers could come to the theater that I managed. And I had a staff of whites and blacks who worked under me when I was manager of the theater at Camp Lee. And those are little aspects of my military existence. And so I was happily discharged in November of 1946. The war was over. The war was over in 1945, shortly after I got in. And I was not particularly enamored over being in a peacetime army, because I had gone in because I wanted to do hand-to-hand combat with the Japanese, because I was a victim of the propaganda of our times. And as an 18-year-old, I thought my life would be enhanced by my becoming a soldier and doing hand-to-hand combat with the then enemy, the Japanese. But I later, as you may be aware of the fact, I was later commissioned in the Marine Corps many years later as an adult. in 1973. I was commissioned as a major in the Marine Corps and served as a military judge for 16 years. And on reserve duty, I was doing my own thing. I was at the University of Washington Law School on the faculty there when I was commissioned, and I was retired from the Marine Corps Reserve in 1986. And but that part of my military existence was entirely different than my teenage experience in the military. And I consider myself with great pride a Marine, and I am still active with a group of judge advocates in the Marine Corps. We meet periodically, and so I am proud to call myself a Marine. But I'm also happy that I'm beyond age. They would not hardly call me to serve in Iraq at my current age. But my military existence is in two phases: teenage service in the Army and adult service in the Marine Corps.